All right. So we are here, 2026. I am very excited about this next guest. I actually met her a couple years ago at a foundation event, and she was speaking about leadership, and I was so impressed. I was like, I am putting her in the list of people that if I ever do this podcast, that she would definitely be somebody that I'd want to introduce for sure. She sits probably the closest to the intersection of strategy, storytelling, and impact. Grace Nelson is the founder and CEO of Magenta Strategy, a consulting firm that helps mission-driven organizations clearly articulate their impact and turn that clarity into sustainable funding and growth. Before launching that, she built her career in strategic planning and development in organizations like the Woodruff Arts Center, and she holds an MBA from Georgia Tech, so we know she's a lot smarter than I am. I believe you started Magenta months right before the pandemic. So
That
you
is
figured out
correct.
how to grow in a difficult, challenging time. But the other piece that I wanted people to know is she actually plays bass in a rock band. So she's cool too. So sometimes you're like, not sure, is this person cool or not? And me being a musician as well, that was something that I felt like was something I needed to mention. But welcome to the show, Grace. How are you doing?
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for that awesome intro. I'm so glad that we are recording this because I'm going to have to go back to it so that I can write in a bio for myself in the future.
So how is your 2026 going so far?
2026 is off to a good start. Yeah, it's always interesting because so many nonprofit organizations run on such a fiscal, and so it really coincides with the timing of how I do my work with Magenta. It's really fast ramp up and then busy about through Thanksgiving and then, winding down in December. I wasn't always somebody who was a New Year's resolution pause and reflect. I didn't necessarily feel like it has to be, December 31 is a Wednesday and New Year's
Right.
Day is a Thursday, and so we don't necessarily have to take that exact moment to refresh everything, but the way that I do business now kinda gives me that opportunity. So, yeah, I'm excited for what's to come this year.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, I think, you have that people that are planners on one side,
Mhm.
or they're also people that fly by the seat of their pants, probably more so like me. Anyways,
Mhm.
so let's talk a little about how did you become the leader that you are? I noticed when you did a presentation about leadership, and you were very specific about how to help people grow, how to empower them, how to
Mhm.
correct them when they're not aligning to the things that your organization sets as targets.
Mhm.
But when you think about your childhood or early years, what's an experience that has shaped you to who you are today?
It's funny what memories come up when you're asked a question like that because it's not necessarily the first one that came up for me wasn't necessarily one that would have been what I talked about if I had been given a lot of time to think. But sometimes
Yeah.
when you sometimes the first one that comes to mind is there's a good reason. So I was thinking about a time that I went on vacation with my parents to visit my grandparents in Florida. I have a little brother. He was probably 6 or 7, and I was maybe
Okay.
8. And we went out to dinner with my grandparents, and my brother ordered a build your own pizza off the kids' menu. And he had these pepperoni slices that he arranged into the shape of a bear's face. Like he folded the pepperoni to look like little ears and a
Yeah.
nose. And my parents and grandparents thought it was just the most adorable, cutest thing ever. And they were like, "Oh my gosh, you are so original. You are so clever." And they were like fawning over him the entire dinner. And I was kind of over that. And I guess I was, jealous and cranky of
Yeah.
the attention. And when we got back to the house, I decided I was going to steal his teddy bear. And 'cause I was just upset with him, and now my brother and I, we have a really good relationship. He's in my band. We're super tight, and
Okay.
we were always close growing up, and so this wasn't necessarily normal for me to be bullying him, and so the bear disappears, and I remember he's all upset. I'm starting to feel kinda bad, and my mom comes up to me and she's like, "Grace, do you know what happened to the bear?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "Did you take the bear?" And I said, "Yeah." And she was like, "Okay." She knows this is not normal for me. She's like, "Why did you take it?" And I was like, "Because I was mad because everybody was paying attention to Davis at dinner and not to me." And I think in that moment, a lot of parents would have said, "Okay, lose your allowance. That's not right." And my mom said, "Okay." it's not actually Davis's fault, that everybody was paying attention to him. I get why you're angry, but that's not the right way to express it. I'll tell you what, if you give Davis back the bear and you explain to him why you were upset and tell him that it was wrong that you were upset, it wasn't his fault, and apologize, you won't lose your allowance, you won't lose your TV time, whatever. I think back to that memory a lot because even though I did not take the bear for a good reason, I did take it because there was a dynamic at play. And my mom, instead of jumping straight to the punishment, she had created an environment where I felt like I could tell her what was wrong and why I had done it. And that has given me the skill set in my career to have difficult conversations with people who are in authority above me. And I can do it constructively and I can do it frankly. And it's really important not only for being a good team member, but also now for being a leader to be able to put myself in the shoes of my mom,
Right, right.
listen to what is motivating people to make, a certain decision.
There's so many questions I have about that because it's such a great story. And number one, this is probably my ADD, but what instrument does your brother play?
He plays guitar and he also writes most of the music.
Okay, okay.
Yes,
Well,
so
you're probably
he was the beginning of the band.
oh, that's cool. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And your parents are both pilots?
Yeah, retired now.
Yeah,
They started out in the Air Force, that's where they met, and then we relocated before I was born, they relocated to Atlanta, for Delta Airlines, so that's why I'm here, born and raised.
that's so amazing. The fact that you're exactly right. Most parents would go right to the punishment, and which
Mhm.
is what most leaders do too.
Yeah,
When somebody steps out of bounds, they do something that they don't see that's aligning to whatever their rules are, whatever it is.
right.
I notice that and I see that a lot in corporate America and in other organizations where they don't have the relationship to be
Mhm.
able to know the person. And your mom knew this was something that was not normal for you to
Right.
do. And so that to me is the gold standard of you got to know your team.
Mhm.
Because if
Yeah,
you don't
it's
know your
true.
team, you can't do that. But it's also creating that environment, that piece of it, that people can be honest.
Yeah.
Because my kids are older,
Mhm.
21 to 30, and it's really fun now, but it's a lot of the work that mostly my wife, but I was involved, but had put into those relationships where they can be honest with you when it matters.
Right.
And then also creating an environment where what was the end goal,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Because the teddy bear was the big piece, but it was really not about the teddy bear at all.
Exactly, right, it was about the attention, and it's interesting that you say that about your own children too, because it just reminded me of like, I think it was like a Reddit thread or something that I saw recently, and it said, "What is a sign that you've done your life right?" And one of the top answers was having a good relationship with your adult children, because whether you are in corporate America or you're an entrepreneur, whether you're in a position of leadership or not in your career, when you become a parent, you become a position of in a position of authority,
Yeah.
and kids know, I mean, kids they understand when something is, feels right or feels unfair.
Right.
So I really love that you mentioned that.
No, that's awesome. So let's talk a little about that trust piece because
Mhm.
when you look at what we were talking about a little about the experiences that have shaped you,
Mhm.
what do you think most teams need from their leaders today that maybe wasn't so critical years ago?
That's a great question because so much has changed with the world going more remote and with everybody having experienced something really disruptive like the
Yeah.
pandemic. And for me, I'm a little bit of a control freak and I like to have clarity. And I think for me, a lot of trust is built around clarity, clarity of expectation, clarity of outcomes. And I want to have a roadmap. If I do this, then this. And so I think that especially now that organizations are operating more remotely, and you're not necessarily sitting next to your team member in person. You may be in a completely different time zone. And so clarity has always been important, but I think that it is even more key now because folks really need to be aligned on what it is that they're working towards, and you have less of an opportunity to build that clarity together. So the leaders who are in those seats need to be really conscious of how they're aligning their team towards whatever goals they've set, and also what they have identified as the best paths to get there so that folks kind of know whether they're within the guidelines, within the guardrails, moving towards that target.
I clearly saw that clarity piece when you were presenting a couple years ago because I remember specifically you had kind of a path for each person depending
Mhm.
on what they were achieving. And
Mhm.
one of the things you mentioned is can they do the task the same as you, the
Yeah.
manager, right?
Yep. Yes. Great
And
memory.
right, and so but another piece was if they're not, you had a clear path to get them there, but
Mhm.
you had so many steps, but then another step was, okay, I need to have a harder conversation with this person specifically about like, is that path them not being in your organization because they
Yeah.
clearly aren't aligning. And that's another piece of it. Like I feel like the trust is a big part of that. But
Mhm.
if you don't have clarity, you have nothing. If you've ever been in a job where you're in a gray area all the time because you don't know where you
Yeah.
sit, it is the worst feeling because you're kind of going, okay, should I do this? Well, and you're second guessing yourselves. And I see
Right.
that a lot with team members not knowing, just tell me what I need to do.
Yeah.
And so I think you said control freak or a controlling person. Maybe I added the freak, sorry.
No, that was me. I accept myself.
But I do think that without the clarity piece, whether if you're, because you can be a control freak, but you're not a micromanager,
Mhm.
right?
Right. Right.
And those are two completely different things because you're trying to control the outcomes, but you're not telling people directly, just do what I told you. You're
Yeah.
telling them, this is the outcome we need. And kind of what your mom was doing was, this is the
Yeah.
outcome we need. How do we get there? So, anyways, do you have a specific framework or something that you do? So say that I go and work for you. And I love hypotheticals. You probably won't, but we'll see. We'll see. I won't make it too crazy. And now I have lights flashing behind me. It must be a special holiday treat. I just
This
saw
is good. No, this is good. This is like building the anticipation for the question. I like it.
there you go. Right. So, but how soon do you start with those rules of engagement or that framework to build the clarity? I'm assuming it's like day 1, 2, or 3, or do you build the trust first and then go, oh, by the way, I like things done this way, and if you don't do it, you're going to get hit with a bass guitar or something.
Good question. Yeah, th- that's a really interesting question because I haven't quite thought of it in that specific sense of the onboarding order. So I'm thinking about now why I do things the way that I do them. I mean, usually when somebody starts on day one, I start with a project list, which is actually how I used to
Yeah.
manage my employees, like all the way across. I would make a project list for them every single week.
Yeah.
And when I was managing people in my real job, my corporate job at the Woodruff Arts Center, that
Yeah.
worked because my job was to manage people.
Yeah.
And so I would make a clear project list, and I felt like I'm giving people this clarity and I'm giving people their metrics of success, and I can do this week in and week out. And that still works for onboarding employees because number one, the project list for a brand new employee, it's pretty similar. Reach out to these folks, make sure your email's working, get onboarded on these softwares or whatever.
Right. Right. Right.
It's a good task list for somebody to jump right on and feel like, they've checked some boxes on their to-do list the first week and they're integrated. And I like that feeling of checking off my to-do list. And so I like to give a new employee that ability because I think we've also all, maybe not all, but lots of people have been in the situation where they're sitting at a desk twiddling their thumbs for their first 5 or 6 days on the job, feeling
Yeah.
useless.
Yeah. No, for
So
sure.
I try to avoid that. And then I have my evaluation framework that you mentioned. I mean, I say my evaluation framework. I learned it from a workshop, an entrepreneurs organization, EO workshop, and I kind of made it my own. But yeah, I put that framework in front of folks early on. I mean, in the first 2 weeks, probably, because again, I like to know what I'm working towards. And I think that if I'm going to be evaluating somebody on that framework, I mean, that doesn't mean that they have to hit all their goals in the first month or two. But if
Right.
somebody wants to be successful within my organization, then they may as well know what success looks like from the very beginning. And I actually have a teammate now who always asks at the beginning of every project that I give her, she asks, what does success look like for this project? You also mentioned earlier that when I spoke at the Sage workshop a
Hmm.
few years ago, that my framework in particular, um, there's a productivity line, basically scoring folks on productivity.
Yep.
0, 1, 2, or 3. And that's important. And for me, because I had been writing those project lists week in and week out, as an entrepreneur, I'm selling myself, basically. I mean, I'm selling the team behind me
Yep.
too, but I'm selling a product that is something that I came up with and something that I have to deliver on. And so I don't have time anymore to be making, 8 project lists every single week. Do that, then I can't really do the pieces of the work that I need to be doing. And so that was when I realized that in that entrepreneurs organization workshop, I was like, this is such a great framework for me to use because it empowers my team to be autonomous and not be waiting on me for a task list. And I need to be hiring folks who are able to self direct. In my evaluation, it's always not just can you do the job effectively, but can you do the job effectively without a whole bunch of revisions or input from
Right.
me?
Yeah. And I think that's the key piece of that as well. You mentioned having your team be autonomous.
Mhm.
Every leader wants that,
Mm,
but they may not be modeling the behaviors for that ever to be the outcome.
right, right.
There's no clarity, there's no clear goals, there's no clear
Yep.
vision, there's no roadmap, or
Mhm.
they're micromanaging so much that people won't step up and lead
Right,
because they're not feeling enabled, and there's not that space for them to grow. Because the other piece of
right.
this is you have to have the clarity, you have to have the trust, but you also have to allow people a little grace, hence the podcast. And maybe that'll be the name, giving people grace. But I think if you don't give them that room,
Mhm.
like if your mom went to you and said, and we keep going back to this, but if she just
Yeah.
immediately car ride home said, I knew you took it, you're in trouble.
Yep.
But she didn't do that. And I think that is the key piece of it, knowing when to immediately, bring in the constructive piece of it or whatever you need to do.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
sometimes you got to let them figure it out on their own a little bit, because they'll never grow as a leader if they're
Right.
always doing what they're told. Right.
Right. Right. Yeah, and, I mean, you talked about the micromanagement piece, and well, like I said, I do like to be in control, but I am sensitive about not micromanaging because I don't like to be micromanaged. And I know how that makes me feel. And that is definitely not how I want folks on that's been something I have had to learn how to delegate better.
Yeah.
But that is um my tendency, before I really learned and practice was instead of micromanaging, I would just do it myself. And that doesn't help anyone either. I think that the micromanaging thing, I mean, folks get micromanaged into paralysis, basically. Actually, another example, a recent example that I can think of is I put a team member in charge of managing a client recently,
Yeah.
and that's sort of been my next step of growth for Magenta. Previously, I've been the touch point for all of our clients,
Right.
and now to grow more, somebody else has got to be the client lead, which is great for the clients because somebody who's really organized and has that account manager skill set can do that,
Yep.
better than I can.
Right.
And but it's a little it's my firm, and I've, invested a lot into it. So it can be a little nerve-wracking to, turn over that degree of autonomy to a team member. And I have a team member who is, like I said, I mean, she's better than me. She's really, really good with clients. And she needed to get on the phone with the client to work something out. And she emailed me and said, Grace, I'm letting you know, I'm going to give this, here's what happened. There was, this confusion about the scope. I'm going to give the client a call, and I'm going to propose this decision. And I read it and I was like, yeah, that seems good. I would actually like kind of tweak it this way. And I started to write to her and tell her that, because feedback is important and
Yeah.
feedback is a gift.
Yep.
But then I thought, okay, if I tell her this, is this going to change the outcome of what's going to happen with this client? And the answer was no. It was a little bit of a nuance, and it was just a little bit of a difference in personality approach. But
Yep.
I realized that the end result was going to be the same, and so I decided to just let her do her thing, because that establishes my trust that I trust her
Right.
to
Right.
execute. And I was like, if I tell her how exactly to do it, then the next time she's gonna have a meeting with me before she calls the client.
See, that's so smart. And I think a lot of people don't think of it that way.
Yeah.
And there's one way to do things. And let me ask you though,
Mhm.
this individual,
Yep.
did she grow into that leadership, or do you think you hired her, with that ability to take on things as almost as if you were there?
That's a good question. For her in particular, I mean, she's a senior member of my team, and
Hmm.
she definitely had the skill set to manage relationships and facilitate relationships. I mean, that's why I hired her,
Right.
is because she came in with that skill set. However, she also I'm very specific about what Magenta's core values are and how I communicate with clients, how we interact with our clients.
Yep.
And we position all of our relationships with our clients as partnerships, for example. And so I think because of that organizational culture, she is able to deliver a result that's going to make everybody happy. Everybody, the
Yeah.
client happy, is going to make me happy.
Right.
So it's both. I mean, you have to have, you have to hire the right person, but you also have to create an environment where they can use the skill set that you hired them for.
That's great. I'm actually taking some notes on that one.
Nice.
Because I feel like, you can kind of micro focus on one of those or the other. Some people hire the right people,
Yep.
but then they don't give them that opportunity to grow.
Right.
And then on the other hand, some people give people the opportunity to grow or the opportunity to take on leadership too quickly.
Yeah.
So if, for instance, that same situation happened, but her solution was not a good solution,
Right.
that puts you at a part where you have to step in, because it's
Exactly.
not the outcome. You're, being outcome focused, I feel like. But it's such an interesting thing. Um, the way that I see our direction going
Mhm.
within the business climate right now,
Yeah.
I don't see a lot of that happening. I see a lot
Right.
of do this because this is what we need to do as an organization, and I don't really care what you think.
Yeah.
And it's the outcome that we've decided. And it's not based on what's best for the client, best for the candidate, best for the person in the job. It's
Right.
just based on this is the direction we're going, and just jump on board. And I think a lot of organizations are going to wish they didn't do it that way, because they're going to lose people and
Yeah.
they're going to lose their clients. It's kind of like that, take one brick off the wall. And, in that situation with this person
Mhm.
on your team, if you would have done something to where she'd like, "Ooh, I can't trust her. Oh,
Uh,
I got a bad leader." Because
yeah.
back years ago, I was leading my own search agency,
Mhm.
and I had a lot of focus clients specifically in the digital marketing and interactive marketing space.
Mhm.
And a lot of them were smaller organizations where the founder was still managing some of the clients.
Sure.
They wanted to get out of that,
Yep.
and they'd bring me in and say, "Hey, we want to hire a group account director, or we want to hire a managing director," but they wouldn't let go.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah. It's tough.
several times I placed people and they called me back and they're like, "Hey, you know what? Like, I love everything about this place, but every time there's a problem, that because it's the number one client, they just go to the founder.
Right.
And the
Right.
founder says, "Oh, don't worry about it. We'll take care of it."
Yep.
And the person that I brought in was trying to do something strategically to help them grow
Yep.
and have a better outcome. And so that
Right.
part of it's almost like an undermining piece.
Yeah.
And the client doesn't get what they want. The person that you brought in to be the leader can't lead.
Yep.
And so they want to leave. And it's not that complicated, but I think it happens either way. But
It
anyways,
happens so frequently. And
yeah,
I mean, you said people lose trust in their leader, but I mean, they also lose trust in themselves. I mean, if they're constantly being corrected for not a good reason, then they start to think, okay, am I good at this? Am I suited to this? Am I
right.
suited to this company? Am I, a good match with the leader? I mean, and I've been in those environments and it can be really demoralizing.
Yeah, no, for sure. Okay, I got a question for you because I know you're focused on the clarity piece and all those
Hmm.
other things. So I'm assuming somebody comes to work with you. There's probably not too many areas where there's doubt going, "Oh, I wonder what I should do today," right? Like it's probably
Hmm.
pretty structured. I
Yes.
sense that. But how do you measure whether that person is making a difference outside of that? Outside of the KPIs, the business measurement pieces, are there things that you notice because you've hired people in the past
Hmm.
or right away, they're in 30 days and you're like, okay, this person is going to be great. Here's why.
Yeah. 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 Well, with that employee that I mentioned earlier, I mean, just as a super short answer for what you
Yeah.
asked, I knew she was going to be great because off the bat, she would ask, what does success look like for you for this project?
Yeah.
And this is with all my Monday.com project management
Yeah.
tasks. All my projects with clients are broken out into a million to-dos to check off, but she wanted to hear from me beyond the all the metrics, like, what's gonna make you feel like we succeeded here?
Right.
And so adding that, I mean, there definitely is a qualitative piece. The other thing that I like about the evaluation tool that we talked about that I use with my team, and I talked about the productivity tracker. It basically
Yeah.
looks like it's a chart or like a matrix, and it's got the productivity tracker 0 to 3 on the bottom side, but it's also got on the y-axis 0 to 3 core values ranking.
Yep.
If your organization has core values, then some of those intangibles can be put down on paper. And I think a lot of times when you've got a team member who is they're doing their work on time, but there's something off and you can't really put your finger on it. I
Right.
think a lot of times that has to do with core values. I mean, that could go for an employee, a contractor. I mean, I use this tool for for vendors and for
Right.
clients.
Right.
Even though I'm not sitting down and evaluating them the way that I would a team member, if I'm feeling icky about a relationship or if I'm feeling like, oh, I don't wanna have this call or whatever, and then sometimes sitting down and, really looking at your core values and seeing if it's a match is helpful. And it also takes out some of the and I realize that I am going back to metrics here, but, I think that when you're able to take out some of the personal finger pointing or judgment
Yep.
and put something into a framework that kind of like takes the judgment out of it, then if one, it gives you some clarity to how you can create a better outcome or create an environment where everybody can be more successful and feel better about the work that they're doing.
Right.
Or if it really just is not a match, um, if they've got a 0 on the core value score or whatever,
Yep.
then you can separate from that person or from that project without necessarily burning the bridge. It could be like a working style or a values mismatch that doesn't necessarily make anybody a bad person.
Okay. No, that's really good. Do you share that your productivity tracker or that tool, is that just specifically to Magenta clients, or is that something like if for people that are listening that are like,
Yeah,
hey, I'd love to take a look at that. Um,
absolutely. Yeah.
and I didn't ask you ahead of time, so hopefully it's okay.
No, I mean, like I said, it's not my, the one that I use is one that I have tweaked. I got it from Scaling Up, the book. It's a book for entrepreneurs.
Okay.
And I learned about that book from from Entrepreneurs Organization. So if
Hmm.
anybody wants I've tweaked it to be exactly what Magenta needs. So definitely message me on LinkedIn and I will send it to you. But
Okay.
it's not proprietary to Magenta. I am using it from another resource that I found. So I'm not keeping it a secret.
Okay. No, that's great. Well, that kind of goes to the last point. What are you currently learning, unlearning, or stretching into as a leader right now?
That's a great question, and actually something that I kind of wanted to touch on with your last point about going beyond metrics, because I am very focused on clarity, very outcomes oriented. And in my work with Magenta, we're focused on impact reporting, metrics, proving that nonprofits are effective with their money that they raise, et cetera, et cetera. So,
Yep.
I'm all about the project management, the numbers, the data, all of that. At the same time, there are plenty of examples, more and more in the real world, where all of that focus on metrics is sometimes counterproductive. So, like over Christmas, for example, my sister in law was connecting through Atlanta to come meet us for Christmas, visiting my in laws. And
Yep.
her prior flight was a little bit late, and I mean, she ran and she was like 1 minute past boarding to get on this little plane, and she missed the flight. Gate agent knew she was coming and, probably would not have thrown everybody off, on the plane to be 1 minute later to their destination. And I'm sure that the airline has those metrics in place because their outcome that they've assigned is on time departure, on time arrival.
Right.
But, we all did not have a good customer service experience because of something that was really, I mean, it was outside of her control. Her prior flight was delayed. And so that, we had to wait and go get her, at midnight by the time the next flight landed and all of that. So there is, there's outcomes tracking, right? And there's aligning all your metrics with the outcomes that you want to have. But there also really, I mean, there really is a human element. It's easier for me to introduce that human element into Magenta and into my evaluations because, I can have those conversations with people on my team and I know my team members going back
Right.
to what we were talking about at the beginning. But how do we introduce that element on a really broad scale for big organizations for their success or their impact reporting or whatever it is that they're working on? So I don't know the answer to that, to how we introduce that the human element on a broad scale. But it's something that I think that we need to turn our attention to across the corporate ecosystem. I mean, I'd be interested to, you've worked in a bigger organization than I have, so I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that too.
Yeah, I think your story pinpoints the challenge in a lot of organizations as well, is that they're trying to scale what they do and what
Right,
that delivery is. So when they built that whole strategy based on the outcomes that they wanted and they put in those metrics, it was for volume and it was
right,
for all the thousands of people that are, going from plane to plane.
yeah,
But sometimes they are thinking about that and saying, what is that percentage that people that are going to kind of be in the gray area? Um,
right,
and I think a good example of that would be right now with autonomous driving. And
yeah,
you have this war with all these companies that are trying to build that.
hmm,
And I heard Elon Musk talk, it was a quote, but he said 0 to 99% is the easy part.
yeah.
It's
That's
that
so
last
true.
1% that takes everything you got to try to deliver it. A Chick-fil-A would probably be another really good example of that. When you go through the drive-through and they're running analytics and they're
Right,
making sure that everything that you do, there's a specific strategy around it. But does that mean that every time you go through there, your waffle fries are still going to be warm? They may not. right? So
Right.
you're going to have challenges, but I think the thing that separates the organizations that win
Hmm.
are, what do you do when the customer receives a product that fails them?
Right.
And then when you step in and you're human, you have a human leadership, and you say, you know what? We're going to make your day. We're
Right.
going to do something else. And that's the thing where people remember that. And it's that stickiness, I think, within that product that you go, oh, I'm going to do that again. I mean, I can think of 5 organizations off the top of my head that I'll always do business with because of the way that they treated me.
Right.
But that's 5. It's not a
Yeah.
lot.
It's not
I
that
mean,
many. Yeah. Yeah.
right. And
Yeah.
so if you think about that, but I don't know, maybe that goes back to the core values that you were talking about.
Hmm.
And you can set that this is the way that it's going to be if you come work at this organization.
Right.
But then you also have to have the leaders follow and model those behaviors. So, anyways, very interesting. Maybe that'll be part 2 of our conversation.
That's so wise and gives me a lot to think about. Yeah. I, I love your response. I'm taking notes.
I really think it was a great conversation. So really appreciate you joining us. For those that have joined and are listening to this, takeaways that I see from this conversation that they can use are, I don't know if we want to call this the teddy bear trust and problem solving
I
piece,
love
but
it.
number one, I love that example was really good. The other piece, the takeaways would be, how do you create your team to be autonomous without you? And you
Hmm.
talked about that, enabling leaders being outcome focused and not so much micromanaging or having them do the things that, exactly the way you want. You did talk about clarity, and I totally agree with that. There's no substitute for clarity in an organization if you want to grow. So also the productivity tracker was a big piece. That was the thing that attracted me when I was paying attention. I was like I thought it was just going to be a normal, I'm sitting there drinking my coffee, smiling, and then you started talking about that. I was like, oh, that's pretty good. I'm going to actually take notes here.
It's magic. Yeah.
Yeah. And but then also hiring for core values is another and I think the last one is that metrics versus outcome, that you and I just kind of came to that conclusion that you have to have a customer service or experience that overlays kind of that
Yeah.
end goal to
Right.
make sure that even if they didn't get the exact outcome, they had a great experience and they will come back. So thanks everyone for joining us. If you have any comments, please put them below, and I will put a link to Grace's LinkedIn. Hopefully you won't totally kill her feed, but I'll tag her in that, and really appreciate the conversation. Again, my focus is helping leaders get better, and I really think we did that today with Grace. Thank you for joining, and we will see you soon.
Thanks, Chris.